Lionel, is that you?
There, I think I got it. What did you have for breakfast today, Brad?
I had a hard-boiled egg and some sweet cherries.
Oh yeah, the cherries are out now, aren't they?
Yep.
We bought a whole big thing of them at Costco yesterday.
Yep. There's a bunch of fruit stands around here. A lot of them are Amish farms that grow them and sell them. You get them fresh off the tree, pretty much.
When you're talking to me, Brad?
Yes, Lionel.
And I'm like not really focused in.
Okay.
Don't serve me up softballs that I can hit right down deep center and out of the park. Okay.
Oh, okay, I'll work on that.
Yeah, our favorite produce store is closing up. Well, they're not closing up. They're going to go strictly supplements and no produce. And it's kind of like, well, good luck with that.
Yeah, I'll say.
Because it's one of those things where you buy the supplements when you're in there buying your watermelon or your cherries or your lettuce or your tomatoes and cucumbers. But I don't know if I'll be going in there just for that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and big news on another podcast somewhere afterwards or coming up. I think it was after a while ago. I said I lost the John Caffarelli interview.
I remember hearing that, yes.
Yeah. Well,
there was rumors to that event, but you thought you had a backup somewhere.
I had a backup somewhere. Look at me.
Attaboy.
Good job, Lionel.
I found a backup. So I didn't lose it at all. But now we've talked about it. Everybody can still go, what a goof. All right. So this is on the free channel and it's a special edition of Viewer Mail. It's an unnumbered stealth edition of Viewer Mail. Because some time ago, I compared the NMRA to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I said it's been 6 decades of futility. Now, keeping in mind, I said 6 decades, not 6 years or 6 weeks. I'm not just poking at the current administration because I think this problem started decades ago personally. And Bruce has a story that he occasionally repeats or recalls that verifies that. And
about the convention in Niagara Falls where it was snubbed by a president.
Yeah,
is that the one you had in mind?
Yeah, tell that one. Or
we were down there. What's that?
You want me to tell it, or should you?
No, I can tell it. We were down at the I think it was the 50th NFR convention, which was held in Buffalo, New York. I actually gave a clinic there, which was a lot of fun. But Lionel and I were out in the sort of general gathering area between clinics and having a chat. And then President Mr. Charles came up, said hello to Lionel, and eventually worked his way between Lionel and myself, put his back to me without even so much as acknowledging I existed. But on the plus side of that, shortly after I met John Armstrong, who was a sweetheart and a true gentleman. We had a nice chat with him for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think what you could say is well over 90% of the people in the NMRA are people that are well worth knowing.
Absolutely. I'd even push up to 95%. There's the few who have given it a bad name, and they're in every organization. You get ones who, whether it's be the ones who give you the cold shoulder and don't acknowledge you when you show up at a division meet for the first time, and you're wondering, like, what the hell's this all about? Or, something like this at a regional convention where the president doesn't even bother to acknowledge your existence. Hey, hi, Bob Charles, president. How you doing? Well, good, Bob. But no, you just worked your way and turned your back on me.
So did Bob, when Bob was talking to me, did he mention Rapido trains?
Your fast track to model railroading fund?
If it's N, if it's H-O, the fast track is Rapido.
No, I don't think it did, because I don't know if Rapido trains was around at that time.
Yeah, I don't think it even existed then.
Yeah.
So that's like that commercial's kind of like a premonition.
It was. Had he mentioned it, I'm sure would have mentioned it. But I said, this was 90, 95, 96, somewhere back in there.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
It was a long time ago.
And the other problem was it was in Buffalo.
Yeah, well.
Actually, my son and I were talking about that. I'm just going to tell this little story, and then we'll get to our guest, who I'm very excited to talk to. Recently, the Boston Bruins traded one of their goalies, Ullmark, to Ottawa Senators. And we were talking about it, and I said, man, Ottawa, that's got to be like the worst place to be traded to. Because it's a lousy team. The arena's out of town. Nobody cares. Ottawa's not that great of a place to live. There's no direct flights to anywhere from Ottawa except maybe Orlando. It's just like the worst. Well,
you can fly direct to Toronto or Montreal or maybe Winnipeg, but not big international ones.
No. You can fly direct to probably Halifax too, but it's not.
I would guess maybe, yeah.
Right, but anyways, there are basically no direct flights to places like Dallas or Chicago or those kind of places, Los Angeles.
Yeah, in any place you really want to go.
Let's be honest. The capital of Canada, Ottawa, the capital of our nation, is a hellhole. It's just now I've offended somebody that lives in Ottawa.
I lived in the Ottawa area for a few years, and it wasn't actually that bad. But
no, it's not that bad. But it's not an exciting place to live. Let's put it that way. My son has spent a fair amount of time there, and he just rolls his eyes every time. So then we're having this discussion about, oh my God, he got traded to Ottawa. It's a worst place to be, blah, 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 blah. So then we're going through all the towns, and we're thinking, well, Winnipeg's better because it's a small farming community. People are nice, yada, yada, yada. And then he says, well, what about if he got traded to Buffalo? And I went, yeah, that would be pretty bad too. And he says, it's not the same. He says, but Buffalo is like this outpost in the United States that's way up in the top of the corner of New York. And he says, there's no direct flights to anywhere from Buffalo either. You got to, if you're on Southwest, you got to go to Baltimore. If you're on United, you got to go to Chicago or blah, blah, blah. He says,
yeah, but that's the way it is a lot with the U.S. is everything's the hub system.
The point I'm trying to make is I'm using the airlines as an example. Let's go back to snow then. Buffalo is worse snow in North America.
They've been known to get a lot of snow at times.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Anyways, that was my story. I'm sorry, Brad.
Why are you sorry? That was a good story.
Oh, okay. So anyways, I said that about the NMRA, and somebody that I think is awesome for the NMRA is John Doehring, who is the Eastern Director of the NMRA. And he wrote a fabulous email in reply to my comment about the NMRA is like the Toronto Maple Leafs, 6 decades of futility. So John is here in the studio with us. Well, actually, right now he's in the green room. So John, come on into the studio and come on in and let's get right to this special edition of ViewerMail.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, John. Welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
I know you've only been in the green room and you haven't had the opportunity to talk to anybody, but I was just saying that you wrote this great email in reply to my comment about 6 decades of futility. And, John, the thing you got to understand is I love the NMRA. I will always belong to the NMRA. There was no reason that I will be like the last guy out the door. I will always belong to the NMRA. And I love your enthusiasm. And I love the fact that you took the time to write this email and didn't agree with me, basically, which is great, which is the whole point of having this podcast and seeing if we can make things better. So I'll start. So do you have something to say, John, before we go to your email?
Sure. I appreciate that. I don't know that in many ways that I do disagree with you. I think a lot of what you said was right. I'm certainly willing to accept the criticism, and I'm often a critique myself. What I'm a bit concerned about is that people who are listening to you don't have as much context as you do. So that and there's always, I think, I was going to say two sides, but that's not right. You know, a more nuanced discussion around many of these things. So anyway, glad to debate it some more.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's lots of people that listen that might only get their view of the NMRA based on what we might say.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had lots and lots of discussions. That's why I'm never opposed to contradictory statements or people that disagree with me, because I think that's how the NMRA will improve. And I mean, like I say, I'll always belong to the NMRA. It'll never stop. Nothing will ever stop me from belonging to the NMRA. It's I was discussing it with somebody, I forget, just recently, because I said I'm going to have John on the podcast. And I was saying, like, without the standards and conformances, we'd be the hobby wouldn't even be near as organized as it is.
Right.
You know, like for whoever started the NMRA, and then they came up with standards and conformances, like that's the heartbeat of the hobby, is the fact that it's organized. And it wouldn't be organized if it wasn't for the NMRA. So it's like, you can't turn your back on the NMRA, but there are things we can do better. Here, I'll read the first part of the email and then we'll get to...
Lionel, if I could just say one more thing here, just it might help a little bit with kind of understanding where I'm coming from, because I've been involved with the NMRA for 15 years now. So that's a long time, but it's not a lifetime. You know, many of you have been members for much longer. I joined the NMRA right before my 50th birthday, but almost immediately and sort of in an unplanned way, I started getting involved in things. And over these 15 years, I spent 2 terms on the board of my division, 2 terms as a president of region, sometime as a newsletter editor. And now I'm just starting my 2nd term on the national board. And because my experience has been characterized a lot by being in these volunteer positions, I've met lots of people who now know me as the NMRA guy, you know. And so I often find myself sort of in this role of explaining this or explaining that or defending this or defending that. And it's kind of ironic because I'm a change-oriented kind of guy. And frankly, everything I look at and see, I see room for improvement, room for change. I'm not sort of a defender of the status quo at all. So I find myself often as the apologist or the defender for the association, but it's not because I think everything's right or even close to that, but because I think it's important. That's kind of where I'm coming from here. So I can kind of sit on the side of those who are saying, hey, this doesn't work, or this doesn't make sense, or I didn't get this kind of experience that I expected, et cetera, et cetera. And I can fully agree with that. I just disagree oftentimes with the way the discourse is happening and the idea that it's not relevant or that it couldn't be relevant. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't want to defend the status quo at all. In fact, that I'm often the one that's sort of in the room loudly.
Yeah, well,
on
yeah.
The other side of that, right?
I think you and I are probably pretty much both the same. It's like we both love the organization. We both want the organization to thrive. And me, maybe in a more uncouth way, I express my opinions, but it's always about, all I want the thing to do is get better and thrive and survive and be way better than it ever was. And you know, like I think I started getting cranked this most recent time when we did an interview with Marty Jenkins, who's the worldwide director at large from Australia. And Marty's a great guy, and I love talking to him, love having him on the podcast. But we got onto the subject of why can't they send out a welcome email to members? Like Bruce signed his wife up for a life membership at Springfield. And it took 2 months to even hear from anybody. And I just simply said to him, like, why can't they? I can't believe that they can't just find the person and manually send people out a welcome email that would be pre-typed, and all they'd got to do is cut and paste and stick it in. And then I got on to, because the money's being deposited. So do they think just a model railroad ferry is dropping money into the bank? Like there must be a way to do that. And he kept saying to me, in fairness, Marty didn't know any better. He just kept saying to me, well, they're changing the computer system and it's an antiquated computer system and blah, 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 blah. And having been in business my whole life, self-employed my whole life with anywhere between 10 and 30 employees, you can't just shrug your shoulders and go, well, it doesn't work.
Right.
You know, you got to figure out a way to make it work.
So I listened to that, and actually a couple of things that came. There were a couple of sort of epiphanies for me in listening to that episode, and the RPM discussion or post RPM discussion that have helped me to think about some things differently. One is that it's sort of how often we kind of just talk about the work we're doing behind the scenes on systems and structure and how that's not very sexy, but we got to do that to build the right foundation. All that's true, but I think it's kind of gets old fast, I think. And the other thing was that you later pointed out was this sort of, well, anytime somebody critiques something, they get sort of thrown back in their face. Well, you should jump in and volunteer and help, you know? And I'm sure I've said that a bunch of times too. And, you know, I've been reflecting on those some and kind of telling myself, no, I got to make sure, I don't want to use those as excuses. I did note there's a couple things I wrote down that I think are maybe even more foundational and more kind of deep in the organization's psyche that lead to this problem with systems. I don't know. Can I unpack that for just a minute?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. And you other guys jump in when you got something to say.
Yeah. So there's two things here that I think sort of go that are in the background or kind of in the context of all of this that maybe many of your listeners don't know and understand. But if you've been around for a while, maybe you do. One is the relationship historically between the national organizations and its regions and divisions. And maybe a lot of people don't know that there was a long period of time in the NMRA where those three sort of levels were much, much more independent of one another than they are today.
Well, yeah, to that point, have been around longer, John. At one point, you could theoretically join the NMRA without being a national member. You could join and be a member of your division and not your region. You could join and be a member of your region and not your division and national, or any combination thereof. And then I forget how many years ago they realized that this wasn't really the way to do it. And they said, if you're going to join the national, boom, you're a member. And then there's other levels you can look at. But, you are a member of the national organization, and you're also a member of your region and division, and how you interact with those two levels is up to you. But
exactly.
at one time you could be a member but not a member, and it was all very confusing. And I know they went through a lot of struggles trying to get that sorted out. It's like, how can it be an NMRA member but I'm not an NMRA member type thing? So, that was the one thing they did that made a lot of sense, was to get rid of that you're a member but not a member, because if you signed up national, now you're a member and had access to everything.
Yes, you're exactly right. So you could be a member of your division and your division collected dues, or you could be a member of your region, yes or no, and the region collected dues. And that process to bring that all together more, which we called vertical integration, happened about 20 years ago. And today, the National Association, as you said, Bruce, right, you're sort of a member of one thing now. And that also meant that both regions and divisions were no longer legally allowed to collect dues. And that was a big culture change. But today, legally, just work with me here for a minute. Legally, the NMRA has the national organization has a relationship with its regions, not directly with its divisions. The divisions are related to the regions, and the regions have authority to sort of get rid of or add new and do various different kinds of things. But I set all that up not because of the legal thing, but because of what it did to our culture. And so people who had been around for a long time, and even who are still around today, but are, if you will, the old timers, right? They had this deeply believed kind of vibe and ethic that says, we have to be sort of hands off at the national level because the divisions are in charge. We can't tell them what to do. We can only sort of advise and recommend, but we can't change a lot of things that would sort of move their cheese around, because that was both legally true at one point And it's to some degree still so. And also because back in those days, when the national organization tried to do things to, let's say, make things more consistent or roll out some kind of new program, they often got a lot of pushback from regions and divisions and even open revolt. You can kind of think of this whole tension as sort of like, do you believe in states' rights or do you believe in the federal government? Kind of using the U.S. sort of thinking, right? And there's a rightness on both sides, but there's tension involved in it. Now, I say all that because today I believe the old timers are a little bit out of sync, because I think when you ask your typical division president or superintendent today what they would think about something like let's say, a program from national to more aggressively reach out to brand new members and onboard them, or maybe phone calls or whatever it is, I believe most division presidents today would say, bring it on. You bet. Whatever you can do to help me, I'll take because I think the newer people that are in this are not all wrapped up in that sort of turf battle that was really, really common 20 years ago. So that's one of the things that sort of stops. So Lionel, when you asked it, why can't we do something that's, it's just like simple and it's obvious, is, well, to be honest, there still are people around the table that kind of say, that's not our role. We can't do that. We can't jump into there. We have to rely on the divisions to do that. That's one thing. The other thing I've observed working at the national level and at the region level and at the division level is, if you think about these volunteers that sit on these boards and that run committees and things like that, they are volunteers in a nonprofit setting. And I also experienced this in my church. Most of those people, I think, are good people, and their instinct is to steward resources, not make mistakes that waste money and time. So there's a natural conservatism that builds into it. And I think over time in the culture, kind of small thinking, right? Just it's very, very hard for these kinds of people sitting in these kinds of groups to make big bets. A big bet would be, like investing several $100,000 in a new membership database. Maybe you might say that doesn't sound like a very big bet, but this is a little bit of why. How did we get to here, right? People make these incremental decisions over the years, saying, I'm not sure we should do that. And I think mostly because they had what they thought was the organization's best interest at heart. But it ends up with this bias towards, I think, again, sort of small thinking. And when you put all those together, that's the context in which we're trying to make change.
Yeah, and maybe the simplest way is, maybe one point that I might be right or I might be wrong, is, like you say, there's been all these incremental changes, and we've kind of arrived at a point where now we have this mess that is of no fault of anybody that's on the present board or any regional president or division. But now we have this mess, and it's kind of like, guys, we got to solve this before half the room empties out. Because a lot of people are just right. It doesn't matter how we got here. We got to solve it. We got to fix it. We got to get it fixed, or else half the room's going to empty out. Now we're going to have 8,000 members instead of 16,000 members. And
you're absolutely right. And I'm one of those people that would say it's not the things that we're advocating for change, the things that are sort of fundamental parts of Gordy's plan, are not so much big bets, risky bets, put up against a kind of another option, which is very low risk, but they're bets we're making against another series of bets that also seems quite risky. So directly to your point, right? Do we want to get twice as big or half as big? These are our choices, kind of that sort of thing. And I really believe that's not, that's not Chicken Little. That we're in a weird point, a kind of a stuck point, I think, in many ways. And we either, the likelihood that we would start to stay stable, it doesn't seem like a very likely outcome to me.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. The fact that the option of just staying stable doesn't seem likely to me either, because, in this day and age, there's certain things that you have to do. You have to respond, or else people are just going to go, you can't even do that. So anyways, let's start reading this email. Yeah. We'll go point by point. And before we start reading this email, Bruce.
Yes.
Have you ever been to a division meet in your particular division where they had Rapido trains?
Your fast track to model roading fun.
If it's N, if it's H-O. Fast Track is Rapido.
At some of the recent ones I have been, but when I was involved as superintendent and secretary, again, it was, I think, before Rapido existed in its existing form, its current form.
Okay.
So I've been around for a long time.
Yeah, it wasn't actually a question. I just needed you to say.
Oh, I just need to say yes.
Yeah,
I knew that, but
okay.
I just needed to get the entertainment in there, right?
Yeah. Hey, Callie.
Yes, sir.
You understand the basic principles of audio podcast, right?
Oh yeah, okay. I understand.
Okay.
I'm listening very carefully. This is going to be a great podcast.
Okay. Why are some of them not so great?
It's actually the topic is very important.
Okay. So anyways, John's email starts. Just listen to the segment on RPMs and then on the NMRA. It got me wound up. Lots to unpack, lots to say, but not all here or today. And yeah, so the one on the RPMs was that we were interviewing Eric Hansman and Dave Owens, and we got to the end, and Eric says, "You didn't look at the stuff I sent you from the NMRA." And it was a link to a division, the Michiana division, and located in Michigan, and they had this fabulous video library. And I started to say to both of them, I'm like, why can't the National do this? Why is this not available? Why don't you go to the National website and they go, hey, look at what's happening in this division? I got on this kick of the National and the divisions are like two separate entities, and it's like, don't get me started. So anyways, John's emails goes on. The NMRA does often seem like an organization that can't get out of its own way. I'll agree. Lionel is right about a lot of it, and that annoys me also. I think it's unfair. Here are the points I'd like to make in summary fashion. Now, so we'll go through them point by point. Number one, the NMRA National is nothing more than a few people with administrative duties. Lots of volunteers beyond that, many running and participating in department work, but with only a couple or few hours a week to offer. Progress is slow this way. How else might we proceed? More volunteers would be nice, but most interested ones start at and prefer the division level. More paid staff would be nice, but that costs money and ultimately requires more revenue, higher dues. Don't get me started on that, John, because I'm kind of like, more staff, higher dues. I would love to know what the NMRA is doing with this $1 million plus budget a year, that they need more staff or higher dues, because they can't even send out a welcome email. If I was running this company, I would say, more staff, why don't you try sending out a welcome email before you start jamming up the prices? That would be my reaction. John?
Yep. Well, the point I'm trying to make is I feel frustrated by the pace of change, definitely. Frustrated is sometimes the nice word. Exasperated. Like at our wits' end. I won't be saying anything that's anything new here, but it's a continual relearning that our fundamental challenge in this association is not having enough people at every level. And I don't know what the answer to that. Kind of what I was saying there. I'm not recommending higher dues. I'm asking, would people be willing to pay more for sort of faster service, if you will? By the way, I think I know what the answer to that, and it's twofold, depending upon who you are. But I don't know the answer to this. This is challenging. I can say, I will say in defense of the small staff that we do have at National, and I can never remember exactly what it is, but I think there are 3 or 4 people on staff, and they net out to somewhere between 2 and 3 full-time equivalents. So that's kind of the nature of the staff that we have. So here's one simple piece of math for you. We have a little less than 15,000 members. A couple thousand of them are life members, which means we have something like 12 or 13,000 regular members, right? All those people renew. Most of those people renew every year. That means we have to send 12,000 packets out. So that's 1,000 a month. That's not trivial, especially imagine, sending out that many packages full of T-shirts, right? There is a lot of correspondence going on. And when you renew, you get a letter in the mail with a new card and some other kinds of things. So, and that's just one example of a whole basket of sort of things that have to happen administratively. I think that the savings or the opportunity for us is when you look deeply into what is it those administrative people do every day and how they do it, you find out there's a whole lot of this kind of like, we'll print this thing out and then type it into that database and then print that out and put that over here in this Excel thing. And that, again, that's part of the whole, we got to just rip the Band-Aid off these old systems and change them.
I think, John, you hit the nail there, because that is really the thing that's slowing everything down, because I know, you know, I've chatted with Speed before, like he's up every morning downloading stuff that comes in overnight to put it into something that can go to national, that then has to be changed to go into the other system. And it just, it's a cumbersome thing. And I know Gordy has got a team working hard to bring the changes about. And, you know, it's just a matter of time before the new system will all be in place. And then when you sign up, it will be fairly painless for you to get the information that you're looking for in your mailbox or email, however you prefer to get it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, but Lionel, I do think you're right. We had a conversation at the end. There were 3 or 4 of us left over after the board meeting this January, and we sat in the room for another 30 minutes talking about what is it we could do, because we were feeling very much the same thing. It's like, there's got to be some way that even if we had to put an extra team of volunteers together in a telephone bank, we can call these people and welcome to the thing and then send them a follow-up email or something like that, right? And so I agree with you that if there should be something happening, even if it's a stopgap matter with Crayolas and Big Chief tablets, right? Forget about the systems thing and all that. Just make something happen. I have recently reached out to talk about that. And we might do something like that in the interim with another group, but we have sort of this limited volunteer pool. So now it's pulling people off of other things, there's always some cost to that. Gordy, the last time I talked to Gordy, though, it does seem like progress is accelerating with this new membership system. We got some super high powered people involved in assessing what we have and coming up with a professional recommendation of what we need, because let's face it, if you back away from this and think about it, we're just an association trying to manage an association, and there are thousands of those. So we shouldn't have to like create anything here or invent any new wheels here. Everybody has a membership management problem, right? So now we have a new system, which I think is supposed to be up and operational by the end of the year. So we do have to probably answer your question directly in terms of, okay, so what do we do kind of on a critical basis for the next 6-8 months until that system's up and running?
I have, I don't know if I would call it a suggestion, just a point I think is pertinent here.
Sure.
I understand the situation you're in that, point number 1, what you said there at the end. You want to deliver all the services in the world, but that costs money. Do you want to pay more dues? I think this is a good time to look at what we can do as an organization that doesn't cost anything. And one thing that I would suggest, and again, this is not a criticism, but it's an observation, as somebody who is a recent addition to 2 different organizations that I'll talk about here. Mm-hmm. It costs nothing to be friendly and welcoming to somebody who's walking into an event for the first time. It costs us nothing to do that. And the effect that can have on a new person participating in an organization the first time cannot be overstated. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that everybody in the NMRA is unfriendly, but sadly, it only takes one to make. And I have to believe, because from everything that I've heard, we're not having trouble recruiting new members. We're having trouble keeping them. So to me, the key is making these people see value. And John, this is why I admire you for coming on here, because I want to see the relationship between the NMRA and AML continue. I don't think it's something the NMRA should be wanting to scrap. And I can just share with you my first experience quickly with a Modeler's Life podcast. My buddy Pat Moore and I showed up. He just thought at the last minute, he was in the Army at the time, and I was getting ready to leave for vacation, so we couldn't participate in the entire Tom Stock event. We just, out of the blue, decided we were going to go meet these guys and have dinner with them. We're two guys walking in off the street, literally. Nobody had any idea who we were. And within 3 seconds of us getting in there, there's people, they actually gave a crap that we were there. They didn't, guys like Kevin, I think we got through the check-in line, and Kevin Marks was on us before we even had a chance. And I know people are busy at these things, but I'm going to tell you, there was nobody busier at Tom Stock than Tom Jacobs was. I mean, he put the whole thing together, and he had his clipboard. He came over to us. I guarantee you, he had no idea who Pat and I even were. I only knew who he was because I recognized his voice from the podcast. But that makes an impression. It's like, here's this guy that's practically tearing his hair out, wanting to make sure all of this goes smooth because he put so much of himself into it. And he's taken time to come over and making 2 new members feel welcome. So, that's, I guess, kind of the secret sauce that the AML has that I think, and I know it's harder to do that in an organization of 16,000 people, but more of that kind of thing. I was just thinking, I was watching a rerun of Cheers. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. And that's what you get. And I think that's how you retain people. I mean, I right away became a Patreon member at the highest level because I said, that's something I want to be a part of. And so, and that costs none of these guys anything, but a few seconds of time to come up and make new people feel welcome. So that's kind of my perspective from it. And I do appreciate you coming on here and listening to this, John.
Brad, I think that's really good feedback, and I agree with you. I went to Tom Stock. I had a super time. I met 20 people, and half a dozen of them have become close friends since then, really close friends. So my experience was super great there as well. In a similar vein, I've been paying attention for the last several years to what's actually going on at RPM meets to see if I could discern what's different about the vibe there versus, say, regional conventions in the NMRA. Mm-hmm. And my assessment of RPMs is very much like what you just said about the group with AML. That is what makes an RPM meet, I think, because if you look at kind of nominally what's happening, there's sharing and there's learning and there's knowledge and there's clinics. Oftentimes the clinics are pretty similar. There's either more or less sort of event choices, op sessions. There's things going on that you can say, okay, that's happening on both sides. What's different is an RPM meet, I think, is owned by an individual like Dave Owens and his passion for NERPM. That's different than a regional convention, which rotates around from year to year to a new group of people.
Right.
And doesn't, it's like, so having that ownership now to be, if I could push back a little bit, imagine, well, what happens if AML grows to be 10 times bigger than it is today and it divides into chapters, then it won't be too long before you'll get one of those chapter presidents who's not holding up his or her end of the bargain.
No, I agree. That's why I mentioned it. I know it's harder to do that in an organization of 16,000 than it is.
When I came in onto the national board, actually started as a region president. When I came on the national board, I had a strong desire to do this one thing, which is something I do in my professional work, which was, if you will, to teach and mentor leadership at the region and division level in how to be more effective in some basics kind of people skills, right? But it's a tough sell, It's like, do people join an association like the NMRA and so that they can get kind of difficult conversations training or leadership skills? It's not quite as much fun as having a clinic on modeling a locomotive. So,
and I will say too that since I joined the officers in the division I belong to, the Susquehanna division of the Mideastern region, they are very good about answering emails, and they have been. It's not that I have personally been made to feel unwelcome, but I know I hear stories from people, and I can't say whether or not they're true, but the fact that we have the issue with member retention leads me to believe there might be something to that.
Well,
I don't know.
I can say from my own experience that when I started attending my division meetings, they weren't very easy. There was a big group of people there. I didn't know anybody. There might have been somebody welcoming me, but it felt hard to get into. There was a lot of introverts in the room. It was kind of cliquey. In my first one or two meetings were frankly not that much fun. I was successful because I was bound and determined to get into the association and learn something. So I wasn't one of these people that sort of once and done. But I can appreciate that does happen, and we're only as good as a few people here and there. And honestly, I don't. This is why I opened up with saying about this background about vertical integration, about how some people wrestle with how much can we tell a division what to do, right? If you sort of think about the franchise model, and that always gets the lawyers to kind of go, oh, we're not that, but what I just mean is conceptually is like we have a weak franchise. We can't tell our divisions, you got to fly the flag this way and you got to have a menu like this and people have to dress like this. It's not quite that authoritative. And yet we do live in this reality that if the volunteers don't deliver on the promise right there in the moment, whether it's greeting somebody at a meeting or following up or sending this email, welcoming and all that stuff, then it's the weak link, So I don't know the answer to that. But my sort of point number one was, honestly, I just don't know the answer to how do we get more people involved in this so that we can deliver at a higher level, except for to squeeze out the inefficiency in what we already have.
Yeah, I don't pretend to know the answer either. I do know we're never going to get to the answer, though, if we don't have conversations like this. So I will once again say that I very much appreciate you taking the time to come on here and talk with us about this. So thank you.
Yeah, and one thing you hear all the time, well, the RPM is so much better, but a lot of it's the same people going. So I guess my question is, why is it perceived the RPM are so much better than, say, an NMRA regional convention? I'm not getting that.
For the very reason that Brad said, is that I went to NERPM last year. I've been to maybe 5 RPMs in my life, but I went to NERPM last year, and it was very much the same as a Modeler's Life event, where it was just, it felt like you were in the AML Nation, where it was like there was all kinds of people I didn't know, but you could just sit and talk, and it seemed like people weren't under pressure to perform. They were just there. People were just there to be there. They were just there to show their models. They were just there to enjoy the activities. They were just there they were just there. They were just there to go to dinner, and they were just there. Whereas somehow, and I'm not exactly sure why, but somehow you go to an NMR regional event, and you're not just there. You're there to partake. You're there. You got to get in so many clinics. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to take this prototype tour. You got to do that thing. And it's kind of like, it doesn't have that same down-home friendly vibe, and through no fault of the volunteers, obviously. And I will just say, Brad made the point of how welcome they were. Today's NMRA board, I don't know them all, but today's NMRA board is very approachable. Now, they're spread thin amongst a lot more people, but they're very, very approachable. If you want to talk to John or Gordy or whatever, and you happen to bump into them, they're more than welcome. They're more than willing to talk to you. And I've dealt with previous boards from 20 and 30 years ago, and they were not approachable at all. They had this, we're on the board and you're not. And it's kind of like they were the ones that created this problem. From 30 and 40 years ago, they're the ones that created this problem. And now the problem exists, and now the problem has to be solved. It's like they wrecked the car, and they brought it home and said, "Hey, Dad, I got in a wreck." Well, are you going to fix it? I got no money. It's like that's the problem. They wrecked the car, and now it's got to be fixed.
Well, our general game plan is to equip region and division leaders with more information and more tools, so that they don't have to spend time figuring stuff out, and they can therefore spend more time interacting with their tribe. Now, whether or not they do that or do that well is still another issue to be that we have to address. And I I am skeptical that, when you put new automated technology systems in place, you don't change culture just by doing that. You have to, in fact, sometimes you automate poor culture. So I think this also has to include developing people so that they're better at this. And I think that will be an ongoing issue. You guys have seen me talk before about how, the way I like to say it is, it's not about trains, it's about people, right? Trains are kind of what brings us together, but what we're really trying to do is help each other become more effective human beings. That's kind of my bigger calling in this. But let's face it, those of us who get interested in model railroading are not we're not the slickest people in the world when it comes to interacting with other human beings.
Yeah, we're not. We've all been. It's a new world because we've all been in our basement, and now over the last 10 years, we've all been able to connect in ways that we were never able to connect before. Brad and I would never have met each other had I not started the podcast, and now we've met each other. Now, granted, he seems to be a bit of a load in my life, but
a drag.
Yeah. And Kelly has yet to learn what an audio podcast is. But you're right. Like, we've all been basement dwellers for centuries, and now all of a sudden it's kind of like we're coming out from after the nuclear blast, and it's like the sun is shining, and it's like there's a whole new world out there. And yep. Your enthusiasm actually is what has kept me going, is because you are exactly the kind of person that should be involved in the NMRA. Like you're saying about, how do you get people to learn how to be volunteers? Well, maybe at every national convention, you should be given a clinic about how to be a volunteer, because you're right. The greatest thing that the NMRA, the greatest commodity that the NMRA has to offer is fellowship. Whether it be you volunteer, whether you go to a convention, whether you enter models and take all the prizes for structures, regardless of what it is you do, that's the number one commodity that the NMRA has to offer is fellowship.
I was, sorry, Lionel.
No, I was just going to say, I give our buddy Andy Zimmerman a hard time, or I say you can't sell the NMRA because what top dead center is, compression is on your car. You can't sell it through standards and conformances. But what Andy Zimmerman does is vitally important. Or you mentioned, speed, and every day he's working on and Riley Triggs working on the newsletter. Like, there's tons and tons and tons of good things happening in the NMRA, but unfortunately, they can't seem to get out of their own way. It's like you said there earlier, like that used to be you could sign up to the division or you could sign up to the region or blah, blah, blah. Well, now you can only sign up to national, and now national gives regions $2 a member. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you doing with this money? All of this money? Are you putting it in your arm, or what are you doing? Like, I don't, it's like, I keep saying, if you want the thing to grow, I'm sorry, but you got to blow up what you got, charge everybody $24.95 a year, and all you get is a membership card and access to the website and access to conventions and what have you. Because people are just endlessly kind of going, what am I getting for my $70? And there's not much to tell them other than, well, what you get to do is you get to volunteer and get out there. If you don't participate, you're not going to get anything out of it. Well, that's like saying,
I understand where you're coming from, and it would have been a hard sell. I was started thinking to myself, if somebody had told me in 2008, the reason why I joined the NMRA in 2008 is because I was nearing my 50th birthday, and I was realizing that I wasn't making any progress. And the reason I wasn't making any progress is because I didn't know how to do anything. And so I need to associate with some members who know how to do stuff so that I can learn from them. That's a taker mentality, right? I'm going to show up and sort of, hook me up and teach me all this stuff. So if you'd have said to me in 2008, well, you probably are not going to learn as much as you thought over the next 15 years, but you're going to have a lot of fun volunteering in a whole bunch of things. I wouldn't have taken the deal. I didn't think I needed fellowship. I wasn't after more friends per se, right? I wasn't after these sort of bigger things. So that would have been a hard sell for me too. But now, having experienced it, I am learning how to do lots and lots and lots of stuff as a model railroader. But I'm also doing a bunch of things I hadn't planned. So I don't know how you how you sell that. I get where you're coming from. You can't sell standards. That's sort of like, it's kind of like public radio, right? You benefit from it, but you don't have to pay for it unless you want to. So I will say, just back to this first thing is, I think what's common about successful RPM groups, what's common about AML, what's common about divisions and regions in the NMRA that are really successful, that are really special. There's strategies and tactics involved, but what you see all the time is leadership. It's a certain person. It's a group of people who are going out of their way to care for other people. And that, I think, is fundamentally what we have to do. And that's why we're making some progress right now, because Gordy and the people he's put around him are providing leadership that makes it fun to be a part of some of these things.
Maybe I would just say one of the things they need to learn to, we both agree that you can't just keep beating on people and telling them that if they don't volunteer and participate, they're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah.
But maybe what they need to try to extrapolate is how much fun it is to volunteer. Make it more of a, it's fun to volunteer because, not you have to volunteer, because lots and lots of people don't want to volunteer. I don't want to.
Well, there's a lot of people, and I mentioned before, there's a lot of people who, for whatever reason, can't volunteer, but they like going out to things. I think somewhere you got to have the discussion. You can attend NMRA events and have a good time, and you're participating. You're getting more value for your membership by doing that. But you don't need to volunteer to it. If you want to, that's fine too. But unfortunately, in some of the comments that came out in the posts, is that it was almost put there like, if you're not volunteering, you're not doing any good to the NMRA, which is wrong. It's the phrasing should be, NMRA is a great place. If you come out to our events and have fun, that's great. If you can volunteer, that's great. We could use help. Yes. If you're interested in helping, let us know. We'll get you someplace help. Not ramming it down the members' throats that if you're not volunteering, you're second class. And that's the kind of the message that was getting put out by some, which didn't do anybody any good in this discussion.
Well, I agree with that. And that's something that I kind of learned through looking at that discussion, that you really have to think about how you say that, for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing, and I've always said, like being a member of the NMRA is like joining your local gymnasium. If you don't go down to the gym and participate, you're not going to get any value out of the money you're spending a year, because you're sitting at home eating potato chips, watching sports and drinking beer and getting fat rather than going down and working out and getting in shape.
And and the problem is too, let's not pull any punches. It was the social media director, Lucy Dormont, who basically said, if you don't volunteer, you're a useless piece of crap. And it's kind of like, this is somebody that's getting paid by the NMRA to do a job. And okay, maybe she made a mistake that day. People make mistakes. It's not that big of a deal. But somehow we have got to kind of figure out how people who want to be, I bet you John would agree with this statement. I understand that being on the board of directors is a volunteer position. But if you decide, if both the pilot and the co-pilot have passed out at 37,000 feet, and you stand up and say, I can fly my Cessna, and I'm going to try to land this plane, you got to try to land the plane. If you're going to be on the board of directors, I don't care if you volunteered. You've taken on a huge responsibility on behalf of 16,000 people. So don't volunteer to be on the board of directors or run to be on the board of directors. If it's like you've taken on that responsibility. It's no different than being self-employed and having employees. There's lots of days I don't want to do stuff in my business, lots and lots of times. But I've taken on that responsibility, and I have to do it. Let's move on to point number 2, or we'll never get through this thing. Okay. Why aren't division efforts promoted more? They should be, but by who? There are over 150 divisions, lots of good stuff going on, hard to keep up with. A better question, I think, is how to get more divisions to want to have their work shared and leveraged by the national. Trust and faith and understanding of the vision is required. So 2 points I would make there is, I think we need like half as many divisions. I think one of the problems for always needing volunteers is there's like way too many divisions, especially in this world of virtual communication. Like you could easily make it a smaller amount of divisions. Therefore, you'd cut the number of volunteers needed in half. And the other thing is, like shared leveraged by the national. Like maybe you need it someplace on the website where the divisions can just post their stuff by themselves or something.
Yeah, I don't know the answer there. I can tell you that I won't get into the details, but I have a much more disruptive personal vision about how we should be organized, regions and divisions. I do think it would be appropriate, given the changes in our society, to rethink the role of a division. But I also have to say, and I guess I should have said at the outset, I'm not here representing the association as much as I am just me. I'm just one voice,
exactly.
not the authority of the whole thing. So,
exactly. I reached out to you and you were happy to come on and have a chat. Yeah, you absolutely are not representing the entire organization based on that. You're an executive member and you want to try to make the thing better. So you come on the podcast to talk about it.
There are things that happen as a result of the way we're set up is when you become a member, you get assigned to a division based on where you live, based on your zip code. And there are pluses and minuses that happen because of that. And I'm one to think maybe we should rethink that. But I have to say, in defense of my colleagues, that lots of people don't agree with me on that. I hear where you're coming from, and Lionel, I've said once or twice, just think about it. There's we have 150 division newsletter editors, all with the same problem. What am I going to put in this month's issue? Right? We have all kinds of those sort of things. Like, why don't we get together and do these in bigger groups? So I kind of sort of think that way a little bit myself. However, pushing back from the other side, when we look at the survey data, the number one thing that prevents people from getting involved in their local division is it's too far away.
Definitely.
So you say, okay, well, let's take this division that covers the whole state of Washington State or something, right, and combine it with one that covers the whole state of Oregon. Well, now we've exacerbated that second problem. So I don't know what the answer to that is.
John, would it be not necessarily getting rid of divisions, but changing the role of the division in the sense of, because I'm a member of the first division in the Northwest here, and I still get email from the Metro North in Connecticut, and would it be better to change the focus from the division because of distance and everything else, so that there's more in the regional aspect or a combination? And I remember back my first convention that I went to, which was a regional convention, and it was a combination of two regions. And it made it easier, to go to than traveling from my circumstances 2.5 hours up to, say, Eugene, where, that's 4 hours back and forth or to get there, to spend a couple of hours and that's it. And also on the other side of the coin is having our mini meet in Medford, and not enough people show up because they don't want to drive down to Medford.
I don't know the answer to that, Kelly, because I think there are two things, and they're both true. One is that some things would benefit from scale, from combining these divisions or doing this at the region level instead. And the other is that there's also super value in the hobby when local people get together, and we need more of that. And not only do we need more of that local in person, but we actually need to teach a whole young generation of people that that's valuable, because they don't even sort of instinctively want to do that. So I think we need both things. So I don't know how to balance that, to be honest.
I got a suggestion, and you can poo-poo me if you want, but Brad suffers from the same thing, and he lives in central Pennsylvania, and he says most of the division meets are 2 hours away. Why not? Why don't we just eliminate the divisions altogether? And you live in your region, and once a year or twice a year, the region has a regional convention, and every other Saturday, the members can get together for coffee and donuts virtually and sit and talk and have a time. Like the divisions the divisions are the beginning of the dinosaur. Like that was what you did in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, is you had divisions because there was no internet. There was no electronic way of being with anybody. But now you've got guys like Bruce, you got guys like Kelly, and you got guys like Brad. They're both saying the same thing. The division meets are 2 hours away. Okay, well, let's get rid of divisions. They're not working anymore. It's a new world. Let's move on. Move on. Let's just have regions now.
I wouldn't say get rid of divisions. I would say, because the divisions basically are those face-to-face meets that people interact.
Yeah.
Yeah, except you just said you don't go to the division meets because
I
they're 2
don't go
hours.
because and of course, no.
So then why have them? If you're not going to go, if half the people that belong to the divisions aren't going to go because of distance, then it doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't work. It's it's a new world.
But like you're saying, it's the focus. Change the focus or the classification of divisions, so it's not necessarily.
Or just get rid of them. You belong to region.
But are you really changing anything by
because
making a division? Because now instead of maybe 2 hours away from a division, you're 3 or more hours to go to your regional thing.
It's the pull, and I think that's the double-edged sword of all this. That's the whole thing. Is my division is spread out over 2.5 hours around the area here, and then all of a sudden the region wants us to do a convention. For the region.
Your division is small compared to the ones when I was living out west, like the 6th division covers parts of Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. You can drive a long ways just to go to a regional meet, which are or divisional meet, which are very well attended because they end up being more like regional conventions because you get some good turnout. And when I was out working out west, it was nothing for me to hop in the car and drive, a few hours over to down to Regina for a meet or up over to
but what year,
Edmonton, things like that. But
what year was that? What year was that you were doing that?
This would have been in the late 90s.
Right. So why didn't you just talk to them virtually through Zoom or something like that?
Because there's no such thing.
Exactly. Those days are gone. It's over. Yeah. Forget about it. We don't need to drive 2 hours anymore to a division meet. Let's move. That's the biggest problem with the NMRA. If you want to watch the NMRA die a slow and miserable death, continue to do what we did 35 years ago. That will kill the NMRA, guaranteed. I will be the last one leaving because the NMRA will have died a slow and miserable death because, well, back in 1995, it was nothing for me to drive 2 hours to a division meet. That's because that was the only way you were going to be able to talk to anybody. Brad.
Yeah, but then, I'm going to say something right now. But then when COVID came on, a lot of divisions went to doing virtual meetings and things like that, and they were getting more people out. So there's some value there.
So the issue of changing that would be to allow to help divisions take the money that they need to be taught or to take on the technology that we have now, so they can have Zoom meetings or whatever kind of process, so that we have that face-to-face contact, which is the same. It's not necessarily the same as being in the same room, but at least you're connected.
Everything there is right now available on Discord, the NMRA interchange, because they have every region and division has access to setting up meetings through the interchange to do just what you're talking about.
Kelly, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Let me ask you an honest question.
Sure.
Would you consider us really good friends?
Yes.
And how did you meet me?
I met you through the internet.
And how far away do you live from me? 2,500 miles, 3,000 miles?
Yeah, they won't. I don't know if they'll let me back in the country there.
Yeah, exactly. But we live 2 or 3,000 miles away. We would consider ourselves to be great friends, close friends, kind of friends that you call up and say, "Hey, man, I'm having a shitty day," blah blah blah. And it all happened through the internet. We don't need divisional meets anymore. What we need is to eliminate the divisions, just have the regions. And if the regions want to have a once a month get together on the and Brad, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Would you drive the 2.5 hours to a monthly division meet? Like, it really doesn't seem worthwhile, does it?
No, not monthly. I mean, I do go to events, but not every month. Definitely not.
Right. Yeah. But would you go once a year, drive 3 hours to go to a 3-day regional convention?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. It's over. The whole division, we got to have division newsletters. We got to have division dues. We got to have division this. It's over. It's done. It's time to move on, guys. You know,
I don't want to keep going back to Iron City N Scale, but the stuff you're talking about is the stuff that we've been doing there.
Well, that's exactly what I keep bringing up.
That's 3.5 hours away from me. Most of those guys that live we have people all over the world now, but the main concentration of guys is in Pittsburgh. That's 3.5 hours from me.
Okay, but how many?
I interact with those guys on a daily basis on the website. We have Zoom meetings every couple weeks. We have online open houses that our members share. It is the new age, and I think it is a really good way to reach people. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, I wrote that down. It's in your file.
That file's got to be pretty thick by about now.
Yeah, so taking the technology and changing what a division looks like, instead of being a area of land, it's now anywhere in the world, really.
Well, yeah, the best.
And those people that are in that division, if they connect through the internet, they connect through the technology that they have available to them, they become, much like you say, Lionel, we became great friends because of the internet. And the same thing should happen on that level. When there's going to be a regional convention, monthly meeting, or whatever you want to call it, hopefully it'll be both in person and also through the internet for people that can't make it. Because I know that was one of the things when Gordy was running for office, is talking about people that just don't have access, either physically because they're in a house and they can't get out, or because they're farther away that they just can't afford to go long distances.
Guys,
yeah,
there are some things you're saying that I completely agree with. I alluded to the fact that I have a disruptive view of how divisions should be organized. There are three issues that I can think of that I'd like for you to consider. One is, and Lionel, these were your words just a minute ago, half the people don't get any value out of the divisions. That means half do. And that's a problem. If we blow up what we have, there is a group of people, a very significant group of people who are experiencing this just in the opposite way. Their division is local, it's close, they're connected, they're friendly, and taking that away from them would be highly disruptive. A second thing here is, right now, today, divisions are organized by something that you can see that's fair and obvious. You get assigned to a division based on your zip code. If we had more of an open system which said, look, there's 25 divisions, you can belong to any one you want, then we have all kinds of potential problems with, you think that we're cliquey today. We'd have to figure out a whole bunch of that kind of thing. Like how do we keep some people from precluding people? I don't know. I don't even know where that goes. But the biggest problem we have is that a lot of people like that, like the divisions they're in today. And then the third thing I would say and again, just to consider, not to defend, but I think you guys have all said this before. There's a deep-seated feeling in the NMRA that the division is where the value is. People believe that, right? This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where all the good stuff happens. This is where you get everything in terms of value. And so we really have to think very carefully about how we modify and change that. Now, having said all those things, I think some of the things you're saying are absolutely right. I think the divisions have become kind of anachronistic. We live in a society where people don't necessarily want to sort of get together for local in-person meets. It does pop up in the surveys. It's kind of like the big problem. They're too far away. They're on the wrong day. We definitely need to rethink this and make some change. I just don't know clearly what it is.
Well, and you're right. It's hard to say clearly what it is, but just like you say, half the people don't get anything out of their division and half of them do. Well, if the NMRA loses half their membership and we're down to 8,000 people, it's really not going to matter. And And I just think, like, however we go forward, we need to use more modern examples. Like you take Brad and their N-scale, their Iron City N-scale guys. Like Brad, you say you have people from all over the world that belong to that now.
Yes.
And I bet you interact with them, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, like I understand that people get to, like, why can't these people that get together at their division meets belong to the region and still get together? Like, I don't understand what not having divisions is going to stop people from getting together. Like region, you can be in your region. The region can have a very, like, if we got rid of the divisions, we'd have so many more people that would volunteer to help in the region. You could maybe make the regions much more stronger by saying, okay, next Saturday, this group of guys is getting together. And, on Wednesday nights, we sit around and talk and blah, blah, blah.
I'll throw a devil's advocate into this. If they got rid of my division, now my 2.5 hours turns into over 4.
For what?
To get to be part, to have that face to face. I become more other than the internet. I become more isolated.
But isolated from what? What
versus say, like when I was living in Connecticut, I was less than an hour away from any division meeting, any regional, other groups.
Okay. Well,
why couldn't we rotate the regional meetings that like they do the national?
That's a convention. They rotate them.
Well, yeah, now, but I don't understand. Hang on, I don't understand. You're 4 hours away from what?
From any kind of regional, because there's
but once a year you're not going to go to a 3-day regional meet. Like you don't care that it's a 4-hour drive once a year.
From my point of view, being in the NMRA is to supporting it. That's what my focus is right now, because the fact that I'm doing so much here in my area related to model railroading that I don't have the time to go out. I have to make it's got to be special. I have to make it special.
But you would go to a region. You'd go to a regional meet once a year
if it was close. If it was close enough, yes.
If it was like 4 hours,
the regional.
What's the longest drive in your particular region? Is it like 4 hours to get
in my region? Go to Canada.
Okay. But so how far?
I think this year's is in Canada.
Okay, and how long does it take you to drive to Canada?
That's going to be more than 8 hours.
Well, okay, but wouldn't you do that once a year to go to a 3-day meet, 3 or 4 day meet? You drive the 8 hours to go to the meet.
I've been here 12 years, and I've only attended one regional meet.
And because
it was held in Medford. That's
like Bruce saying he's only ever been to one national convention because it was in his backyard. It's like you're always going to have those people. That's never going to change, right? It's like me. I pay my. Oh, don't get me started on that. I pay my $30 Canadian to the NMRA. Right. Have all the benefits of people paying $70.
Right. Anybody in particular come to mind? I'm sorry.
But I belong to the NMRA for the same reason you do, Bruce, because I'll always belong. Period. End of sentence.
Right.
Right. You're never going to stop belonging to the NMRA because you're like me. You just want to be part of the model railroad organization, and there'll always be those people. It doesn't really matter. I don't go to the conventions that are on the West Coast hardly ever. I mean, I used to go all over when I was younger, but I don't go as much anymore because I'm not interested. But I'm still going to belong to the NMRA. But that doesn't mean I'm going to sit around while the lights of the NMRA slowly sink below the surface and not do anything about it.
No.
That's just the way it is. All right, let's move on.
I think it's complicated by area, it's complicated by members, and obviously it's complicated by who's running the show. I mean, it's just all right. There's so many variables.
Let's move on.
I see what you're saying about your region. I'm just looking at the map. It goes clear up to Alaska.
It's a huge region.
Yeah. But I get the one thing that keeps me connected based on that is getting the regional newsletters, getting the even my division, getting those.
Are they mailed out to you?
Email. They're all email.
Exactly. Boom. There you go. It's all done virtually.
If we could get the technology that people will follow, and yes, we're not going to get everybody because some people, they don't even have smartphones, or cell phones.
You want to know the easiest question to ask people nowadays to find out whether they're into the technology or not.
Yep.
The only question you have to ask people nowadays is, do you have a landline?
Yeah.
And if they say yeah, you go, yeah, well, then this is too complicated. This is too complicated for you.
Yeah, I've got a member of the live streamers, and she has a landline.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have voicemail on it, and it's tough.
Exactly.
It's tough.
Like people,
she's the one person that will be there every Saturday. It's
not that the NMRA has to go away. It's that the NMRA just has to change to today's world. That's all. That's all it is. It's not that big of a deal. Let's move on to the third point.
Yep.
NMRA national folks are flying all over the country and world for free. I get it, but disagree. I am reimbursed for airfare, hotel, food, and transfers for 2 meetings each year. I pay for registration, transportation like rental car, and all the extra fare. Yes, it is a nice perk of being on the national team, but if we didn't have this, it would cost me $2,000 to $3,000 just to be on the board. Would enough people do that? I already spend $5,000 to $10,000 a year participating in leadership and administration in this hobby. By the way, I've actually advocated for increasing this budget so that I might attend 1 or 2 additional regional conventions beyond my home, and more to improve leadership, communication, and understanding across the association. Most BOT members did not agree with me on this, and so I have to step back from offering to attend and participate as a leader in these extra events. So let me just first say, I say the whole thing about the free trips tongue-in-cheek, because I do agree that the president of the organization and the 6 or 7 board members shouldn't have to be forced to pay their own way to get together twice a year face-to-face to run the organization. I agree with that 100%. However, it doesn't stop there. It's the heads of departments. It's this person. It's that person. It's the next person. And then the problem is, okay, well, the guy that's the head of the such and such department, he gets to go to Springfield for free. But the guy that's running the region and doing a really good job running his region, he can't go to Springfield for free. And I'm like, where do you draw the line? And there is no transparency about this particular subject whatsoever. So I agree completely that the president and all the board members should get some sort of reimbursement, but I think it should stop there.
I will say that I think one of the things that I would like AML listeners to know is that when we attend, all right, so we get reimbursed to go to the board meeting, which usually takes 2 days, right? And I'm being transparent here now, right?
Right, absolutely.
And then I get to stay at the convention for the whole week. And the association picks up my hotel room as long as I'm sharing with somebody. But when we are on expense, if you will, like that, the expectation is we are not attending that event as a participant member. We're working the event as a part of the corporation. And so we make ourselves available for meetings and individual. And we just sort of, I'm not saying that we don't have fun or that we don't attend clinics or operating sessions, but we usually put in a lot of time. And Gordy, of course, runs circles around all of us. So it kind of goes hand in glove. I don't know if it always has been that way, but I can tell you that today the expectation is when you're being reimbursed for this, you're supposed to be working. And I'm a big believer in that, because I do think if you, as I said in my message, if you sort of go the other way and say, let's just cut it off for everybody, then you end up getting a kind of a member on the board that can't afford to do that or doesn't mind doing that. But then that person hasn't been picked based on their capabilities. So that, where do you draw the line between board members and department heads and I don't know the answer to that.
I bet you it's Springfield. I'm taking a guess. I have no facts to back this up whatsoever. I'm guessing that Springfield, 20 to 25 people got their freight paid for. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Like, come on. Like, this organization is not big enough to be paying the freight for 20 or 25 people to go to Springfield. And it's not fair to the rest. It's not fair to everybody else. And I get it. But lots of people run big organizations that volunteer like that. You know, like, I don't have a problem with the board and the president being reimbursed for their time, because there's no argument they put in a lot of time. But it's like somebody, you know, it's like the person that runs, you know, I got a friend that's involved in the national organization for cancer, you know, whatever they call the Society of Cancer or something. And they're pulling down, they're a regional person, and they're pulling down 200 Gs a year. And I'm thinking, you know, and then for cancer, like, what is it? Some ridiculous number, like 35 cents of every dollar goes to the actual fighting of cancer. And it's like, you know, if we didn't have all these people making this huge dough. So I got no problem with the board and the president, but it doesn't stop there. It starts trickling down to all sorts of people, and there's no transparency. You go to the budget and see and tell me where it says how much money is spent on travel.
This is the budget for officers and meetings, and the total is $128,580, and that is for last year, because there is no budget for 2024, which I find that's another problem with the computer stuff. Why isn't the budget for 2024 up already? It should have been up.
Where are you seeing that travel and 120?
It's in the 2023 budget, which is, let's see, where did I put it? I'm gonna find it here. It is under.
Yeah, there is a line item in there for that.
Yeah. It's on the website for membership access, and it's the NMRA budget for.
Right, I know. I'm looking at the budget. Where are you seeing that number?
At the top, or first and second page.
Well, you said a specific number, $129,000.
Yeah, that's on the second page. There are 4 pages, and the second page takes the total of the winter meeting.
Oh, I see. Officers and meetings total $129,580. $128. That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, but it's I don't know. And you, like you're saying, there's not. Are they spending it all on the board, or are they
Well, no, they're not. They're not. That's if you cut that. You could cut that in half if you stopped eliminating half the people that get free trips. Like,
well, let me just say that includes this bigger team going to 2 meetings. It includes reimbursing other people from the board or officers going to regional conventions. And we have a policy that if a board level person lives in that region, like, I'm expected to attend my regional convention every year on my own dimes. And if I'm if we have that region covered, then I'm the executive, kind of representing the national. So the budget that we have for people to attend regionals is when there isn't that kind of coverage. There are also other kinds of meetings that happen during their year. Standards and conformance people have to meet with manufacturers or something. I'm not saying that that's the right number. That could be changed for sure. I think the bigger, to me, the way I tend to think about that is, are you really saying that that's the wrong number per se? Or are you really saying you're concerned that you're not getting value for that, right? If I could demonstrate you what was happening in those meetings and you said, okay, that's reasonable. It's not some sort of junket kind of thing. This is how we do what we do. Then that part, that I don't know what that is. That's 10% of the annual budget or something.
John,
I don't mind the criticism. It's just unfair to say that everybody's sort of flying around,
Absolutely. And
it's all for free, and we're just enjoying ourselves.
Well, absolutely, and I understand that I embellish the whole thing. I understand that I embellish the whole thing, but 10% of the revenue for the NMRA is spent on people getting free trips and flying around, and they can't even send out a welcome message. It's like, you know what?
Well,
why don't
when you couple that with the thing everybody else should be willing to volunteer? That's the optics of that aren't great.
Yeah, it's. But John, the problem is this isn't your fault or the fault of the current NMRA board. This is a culture that's been cultivated over the last 50 years. Somewhere along the way, the guys that were on the board, the people that were on the board, whether it was in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, or the 70s, started saying, hey, you know what? Why don't we reimburse ourselves for this? And then the next thing you know, there's 20 or 30 people getting a free ride to Springfield. And it's kind of like, no, no, you don't. If you want to, and then of these 20 or 30 people, all they do is go, if you're not going to volunteer, you're not really helping us. And it's like, shut up. You get to go to Springfield for free. You do it. Anyways, that's I completely agree that there should be some reimbursement. I completely agree that that's part of running an organization. But, that's something that they need to look at on a, they just need to.
Yeah. Like I said, like I said in my notes here, I actually advocated for increasing this budget because what I think we should do is have more people go to region conventions and spread these other things we've been talking about, Yeah,
it's like
training and kind of making sure that all the other leaders in the association are kind of on the right game plan. I think there's good work that could be done, but lots of people and on the board said, no, we shouldn't do that. That's too costly.
Well, and that would not be a hard sell for me to have John Doehring go around to regions talking about how to run your particular region or division. That's not. And the other thing is, it wouldn't be a hard sell if the thing ran better. But all you hear from most people is, I get nothing for my $70. And it's kind of like, well, one of the things you're getting to send 20 or 30 people to Springfield.
Can I share something with you, which I think you're going to be surprised because I was, about, what you hear from people, because we just completed a national NMRA members survey and we're processing all of the information right now. But we got 3,000 responses. So that's a pretty statistically significant sample of our association. Now, I don't know if it's perfectly representative, and I suspect there's a little bias in it, right? The people that responded to this survey are a little bit more pro association than against, or at least the apathetic ones would be the ones you would expect would not. But these are just members, right? The members in our association, we asked them, what do you think about the dues and the value that comes through them? Only 6% of existing members say the dues are too high per se. No matter what else you tell me, the dues are too high, 6%. Another 23% say the dues are too high given the value that I'm getting, right? But when you put those two together, you're still only at 30%. 60% of members say the dues and the value are about right. That's higher than I thought it would be. And an additional 14% said, I get great value out of the association. Stop talking about this. So that's more positive than I think. So when you say you hear a lot of this, I think there's two things going on. First of all, I think a lot of that feedback is not coming from existing members, but former members.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, let me finish. I think that's right. So my data set here doesn't show the people that have opted out because of their experience. And it doesn't represent non-members, who is our real target. And we haven't quite figured out, how do we get to those people? We can't just send a survey out to the world and ask people, what do you think about model trains? So we're still trying to figure out how to get those voices. But I don't, I think what we have here is a population of people that's pretty significant that are saying, this is about right. It can always be better, for sure. And then we have people who think that the value they're getting for their dues doesn't make sense. But my suspicion is there aren't as many people as we sometimes think that say, I don't care what you're going to tell me, $80 is too much money.
Oh yeah, that's squeaky wheel.
Right.
That's squeaky wheel. Like if
Right. That's just a very low, very, like I said in my message, I spent $630 last week on Rapido trains, so it's not a cheap hobby, right?
Exactly.
And I was thrilled to be able to do it. But anyway.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Bruce? He spent $630 on Rapido trains.
Your fast track to model railroading fun.
Rapido trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
And I sent the money to Canada to help you guys.
Yeah, let's not go down that path. Why it cost me $30 American to belong to the same organization that it cost Brad $70 American to belong to. That's a bizarre. That's part of but again, that's part of the old world that was created that has been left for you guys to fix. And I'm with you, John. You're probably right. Like that's probably something I shouldn't even talk about anymore. It's like I wouldn't care if the dues were $150 a year. I'd still belong. It wouldn't bother me. I mean, I don't care. I don't care that the dues are $70 a year. It doesn't bother me. All I care about is we spend $430,000 on the monthly magazine that is like basically no use to anybody. But
Well, no. Again, the survey data says it's one of the most valuable assets. But is it worth what we're spending on it? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. Let's move on to number 4. Otherwise, we're not going to get through all. Yes, we should be able to interact in real time with new members. There's no real excuse for this. Retention is a big opportunity. This must be fixed. I see 2 parts. Systems for people to do the work. Our systems are so bad, a major expensive overhaul is needed, and a work progress is needed. Understood. And a work in progress now. 2, leadership. People training for frontline division and regional folks to improve action and interactions at the ground level. I don't know what is happening on this latter part. I hear that's about stuff, but I'm skeptical. I think those are the number one thing that scares me about the board's line of, we have a system that's coming into place that's going to fix all this. Boy, I sure hope so. Because me, as an employer, all these years, if you have the same people that can't be bothered to send out a simple email, welcoming email, running the new system, it ain't going to improve because the same lackadaisical approach is going to work whether you have, 3 external tanks firing the rocket into the sky. If the O-ring is left off of one of them, it's still going to blow up.
Well, what we have is there's 2 different pieces to this. One is what happens from the national level. And happens very, very quickly, right? And our antiquated systems impede us doing anything quickly. The other thing that impedes us doing anything at national is we just don't have very many people there. So I don't think they're fundamentally culturally, in the way. They just have too much to do given what they're doing at the national level. So there's a promise there that a system that's got some automations built into it is going to be able to send out some of the basic stuff. Not a super high touch thing, but a series of automated messages that say, welcome, you should be hearing from thus and such. Here's the next step, things like that. So I think that part can be and will be fixed by our new membership system and all the rest of the technology platform that's changing. My concern there is that all of that stuff is really hard work and it's just taking a long time for it to happen. And I don't want to keep saying this for 10 more years. The second piece, which is really the higher touch, more empathetic welcoming that would come from typically from division personnel. I would say the opposite situation there. They tend to be pretty quick once they get the information. They're impeded because they don't get the information quickly enough. Because remember, I said at the beginning, we don't have a relationship directly with the division. So we have to send things through the region, and the region then has to send it. And then the antiquated systems both ways sometimes mean there's a few days that have to be processed at the national level, and then a few more days at the region level, and then their monthly deadline. So you might miss that. So then it goes to a whole cycle and yada, yada, yada. So when local people get a hold of things, they tend to move pretty fast. But then where my skepticism in there is, but as we've talked about, and as you guys have said here today, and as many other people have said before, it's like the quality of that interaction is super important. If somebody looks at somebody the wrong way, says the wrong thing, doesn't follow up, there's a lot of risk early on that you're doing the right thing in those interactions. And that's where I think automation is not going to help that at all. As you said, right? Culture is culture, right? And we need to be doing something to better equip, I think, people at the division and regional level to have these sort of basic interactivity, communication skills, leadership, whatever that is. And like I said in my message, I hear that there are things happening. There's a big push on that we call the Division Success Kit, which is sort of finding best practices around and sharing those. But that's the bigger work. And in a volunteer organization, it's particularly hard because let's say I come to your division and help and offer a training class or some clinics, or you can get them all online, right? Well, and there's 5 or 6 of you on the division leadership team. Well, in 2 or 3 years, that's going to be a whole different group of people. So that's really about changing people's abilities and capabilities broadly across the whole association. There are hundreds and hundreds of people. So
yeah, it's a problem. All right. That's for sure.
That's work. That's work that has to be done. People join this organization. Like I said, they join this organization because they're interested in trains. They don't join this organization because they want to sort of, instinctively get involved in helping other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody joins because of their interest in model railroading, and then almost everybody ends up enjoying it because of the fellowship between the interaction between, like you. I remember once you said, like you're standing on the outside of the castle and you think, okay, I'm going to go in the castle and it's going to be all about model railroading. And you get inside the castle and it's like, yeah, there's model railroading, but the best part is all the people in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it just depends on individuals doing the right thing. There, we talked about how great Tom Stock was, but there is no Tom Stock without Tom.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody has to
absolutely
step up and say, I will take that. I will lead that. I will do that. And then a bunch of people have to come around him and say, I'll help you. So
what's the national doing to enrich the leadership in the division and region, other than the documents that are online for their duties and how to do it and all that? And it seems to me that it's sort of like I watch what the guy did before me, kind of thing, that by being there, and that's where some of the bad practices may be carried on. But what is national doing to sort of unify it? I mean, when I was working for, the fire department, if you wanted to be an officer or if you were in a specialty, they pulled people in from different areas and ran them through schools for leadership or schools for becoming an officer. Is the national going to be doing anything like that for the superintendents of the divisions, for example?
Before you answer that, John, Kelly, that is a really good question.
Thank you.
Did Bruce?
All my questions good?
Did Bruce write that for you and hand it to you?
No, he did not.
Oh, okay. Brad, you did it.
No, I think that was all Kelly.
Wow,
it's me.
I mean, Kelly, here's how I would answer that. The way you described it is the way my head works and the way I think about it. Like, that's the first thing I go to is we should have a sort of division superintendent school. And whether you send people to that or whether you do these 12 modules online or something like that, that's exactly where I would go. Where we have gone that I'm aware of in the last several years, look, when we got onto this board 3 years ago, and at the same time, one of the positions on the board is called the RAC director, the Region Advisory Council. So there's one board member whose job it is to kind of herd and corral and interact with the 17 region presidents. And when we got onto the board 3 years ago, there was very little communication going between national and regions. I can attest to that because I was a region president at that time. And except for them asking me once or twice a year to provide a report, there was no communication that I can remember either way, up or down. So one of the things that's happened over the last 3 years is a lot more. Bob Weiminer runs that, and a lot more interaction with the region presidents. So quarterly, they get together. Gordy is involved in most of those. So that has been the approach so far. We don't go straight to the divisions. We work through the regions, through the region presidents, and hope that will cascade down. I think the response is good. It's better than it was. It's not good enough yet. That's how I would assess it as my one voice. I still would love to have division superintendent school. And you remember when I said at the beginning, remember we have some people sitting around the table saying, oh, you can't do that. You can't get in the division's business because of that long history we have. But I don't think that's where I think most division presidents would say today, that's fantastic. How do I log into it?
Right.
And they would just eat that up and love that, and anything else we could do to help them. So I hope that we get there, but we need a much, much bigger push in that area.
That is a fabulous idea. That is an absolutely fabulous idea. That's the kind of idea that could change the future of the organization. It's just the leadership of a division superintendent school, like twice a year. You get all the division superintendents together on virtually online together and lead a discussion group. I think that's an absolutely fabulous idea. And you mean to tell me there's people on the board that are against it?
Well, they're not against they're more against not against. They're skeptical that it's about the power dynamic and the role, right? Is this something that, so instead that group would say, let's put together a list of recommended practices and post it on the website. Now, I can only explain that as like, if you go all the way back to remember when you could sign up for your division and not be a member of national. And then we went through vertical integration and we had this big states' rights versus federal government fight. And there were two camps. And now you fast forward to today, 25 years later. And the question is any of that even relevant anymore? What we mostly have is people.
Because John, that's the problem right now. You talked about it, is the communication aspect.
Yeah. Both
finding out, we got new members, or the communication saying, hey, I'm having an issue here. And we can't interfere in division, well, no.
Yeah. No, I think when you put these two things, this is what you can get excited about. When you put these two things together and you say, look, if fast forward to this time next year, we have a membership system in place that allows national to process this stuff much faster. You're now getting this series of automated messages, which you've come to expect in every aspect of your life. Mm-hmm. Everything you sign up for, right? You get all that kind of stuff. That's just the speed of life today. And then, 2-3 days later, you get a phone call or an email or some combination from a division super or from a region welcoming committee or something like that. Maybe you get a follow-up call at some point from somebody from national, just checking in to make sure, it's weird. We have a weird association because we have a lot of people who join but don't want much touch.
Right. They
want to be sort of like really passive members. And so sometimes you call those people and they're like, look, don't hurt me. No, we're just calling to see how you're doing. Oh, I don't need any of that. But I think for the third or 40% of the more engaged side, I think we're going to be able to make a much different kind of experience early on. And I see this all the time in my work. Retention of people in the workforce broadly across the whole economy is a huge issue today. And when you untangle that, one of the things you find out is that everybody treats onboarding like this is what you do on your first day of work to prove that you're a legal citizen, or how to get signed up in the health plan. But that's not what onboarding is. Onboarding really should be about making people feel welcome and reinforcing that they made a good decision to join. That should take a while over a period of time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's I think that's between communication and education, especially education. Having a system in place where people are learning. They may not be wanting to be a superintendent or an officer of the national or whatever, but they get that education ahead of time to say, oh, here's what's available to you can learn, see what goes on in your division. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, I got a region. Oh, what's going on in region? And then you move to, so if you have these people that are now educated in what the process is to move up the ladder. But when you talk about onboarding, I remember when I was first worked for the steel mill, I spent 3 weeks being welcomed, by all the factions, but everything from safety to security to production and all the other stuff that goes along with becoming a new employee. And it felt really cool because especially I was with a bunch of other people. So it's very important that it's not just, hey, here's your paycheck and this is what you got to do.
Your idea of twice a year, I made it twice a year, but whatever, twice a year, getting together with division superintendents virtually, having a big virtual meeting, that is an absolutely fabulous idea. And that's the kind of idea that shouldn't be met with any opposition whatsoever. That should be like everybody raises their hands and goes, yeah, let's do that. Because anytime you hear somebody, we don't, you're thinking, okay, then I'll just keep slamming my head into the desk because...
The biggest problem in any organization or company is, we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
Well, now it's time to think about doing it other ways that are most likely better. It's like building models. Back in the 40s and 50s, you used tin cans and cereal boxes to make models. Well, guess what, folks? There's newer ways of doing things now. So the worst thing you can say is, we've always done it the way, and that just kills anything.
Yeah,
and having been a superintendent and whatnot in my day, and knowing the guy who's looking now, we were always looking for ways to try to get more value and things out to the members, and doing the best we could under circumstances that we had. So it's. I would, and it's this funny thing. I go, the divisions, because they went through the whole thing about getting rid of regional presidents and board members and things like that when they restructured, which was kind of confusing to all, I think. But I think anything that the national, it should be an organization that the national, figures they can help the divisions. Then let's do something to help the divisions. And I don't think there'll be any division superintendent out there that wouldn't love to find out how we can better serve the members in his division.
Mm.
Well, we know that at any one given moment, we usually have one or two, maybe not even that, maybe one region where they're not playing ball with us for some reason. It's usually a lack of communication, but sometimes their personality. So maybe one or two other. And at any point out of our 150 plus regions, we got a handful of them that are like in open revolt over something. But that's kind of irrelevant, right? If you had anything that we're doing to help the overall association that's kind of opt-in like that, that's just what it's like with a group of people. You're going to have some that are really lean into it, some that are okay with it, some that are kind of, But so I think in the past we let the distracting voices be too loud. And we just need to move past them. If you don't want to come to this program, that's fine. And there's a lot. I'm doing a disservice to a lot of things that are going on today that we just don't have time to talk about. But we've had many conversations about, well, how would you? Aren't there ways that you might be able to incentivize divisions to do these, whatever the behaviors are that you kind of want, right? Or some kind of thing. And so we've had a lot of conversation around those. We're still wrestling with it. I would say, and it kind of rolls into the next point, if that's okay, Lionel. But I've spent a couple of years now. I came into my time on the board with a handful of, well, really just two. I had two big ideas of things that I wanted to work on, and then Gordy's given me a couple of additional responsibilities, but one of mine was we've got to have a bigger vision for this association that sort of pulls us into the future and helps us make better strategy decisions. And that became this process. It's taken so much more time than I ever thought it would. We call it Vision 2030, but so, 5 or 6 years from now. And I've been on your podcast before and we talked about the 10X idea, and what the association would look like if it was transformatively bigger and different. I will say, going through all of that, there's been a couple of real interesting learnings for me. One is our board, there are 9 members on our board, and then we have 4 officers who are not on the board, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. I would say that there's only a couple of people in that group that are skeptical of change, or want to go really slow, 1 or 2. The rest of them fall into 2 groups. Those that want to change pretty substantively, and those that want to change a whole lot more than that. So we have as a board, I think, we've done a lot of work, but we've built a lot of consensus around, okay, so the 10X idea is a really interesting idea and in sort of a longer term future, but we really crystallize around what a 2X idea actually looks like in practice. What does the NMRA look like in just 6 years, in 2030, at something more like 30,000? And that is not trivial either, right? That for an organization that's barely been able to hold on in the last year and has got a 10 or 15 year history before that of slowly declining every year, the idea of being twice as big as we are today is pretty huge, pretty mind blowing. And now my thinking is, okay, so in order to do that, you go through department by department, right? Convention, education, AP program, divisions, administration. You just go through everything and say, what's the implication of that? What do we have to change? What's the next level? And on and on and on. The other lesson that I've learned, and it's somewhat embarrassing to say it, given that I do this for a living, but I actually thought that when I engaged in this discussion with people that run the various departments, and we have a dozen or so of those, right, department managers, I almost thought that I'd have conversations with people and they'd say, where have you been all my life? Let me get my list of ideas out. And, there's so much we could do that we haven't been able to do because of this and such and this and such, that I would get a whole lot of subject matter expertise in each one of those areas. And I really haven't found that. And I don't mean that to say that, sort of to throw any of the department managers under the bus. But I think what my other board members have encouraged me to see is think of these people as right up to their necks in alligators all the time. And just holding, the level to keep executing tactical things. Very few people have had very much bandwidth or ability to sort of step back and think, what would this look like if it was twice as big? And so we've just had to slow down and talk our way through, well, what does that look like? Because, if you ask, well, what does a AP program of the future look like? You're going to get a whole lot of different kinds of answers. So I'm very, I'm both a little bit frustrated. It's taking me a long time to pull all this together, but also still very optimistic that we are coming together at the top of the organization around a future vision that I believe almost everybody will agree with.
I say the problem for me with you, John, is you just excite me too much. I think you are the prototype of what board members should be. You just have this, damn the torpedoes. We're going to make this thing work if it's the last thing we ever do. And it's just, I'd love to have you on this podcast every other week, just talking about this stuff, because I think it's people like you and that will make this, that we'll be eternally grateful for, to keeping this organization alive and well. Because without the kind of visions and the dreams you have of the future, the whole thing is just going to die. It'll just completely go away. And you have that intangible where you can't teach it to people. I mean, the idea you have of getting division superintendents together for a virtual meeting, I mean, that's going to be my new pounding on the drum thing, because that is an absolutely brilliant idea. It's that should be brought up at a board meeting, and within 2 minutes, everybody goes, I agree, carried, move on, go ahead, John, go ahead, do it. And it's because it's like, well, it's a brilliant idea.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, but let me say about the whole bigger group. And I was thinking about this morning. So the analogy is, you know how you're always asking people, what is it about this hobby and what draws people to this hobby? One of the things I was thinking about this morning is model railroading appeals to people like me. Trains appeal to people like me because I'm a dreamer. And I was attracted to this idea that this is my opportunity to build a whole world all by myself, exactly as I want. I get to play God in this world, so to speak. So model railroading appeals to me as a dream. I'm a dreamer. But model railroading also appeals to tinkerers, right? People whose instinct is, how does that work, right? And model railroading appeals to builders who want to create things and actually get a lot of satisfaction out of swinging a hammer and doing things. And if I think about it some more, I can probably come up with 2 or 3 more prototypes. But that also had occurred to me as a good metaphor for what our leadership team needs to include. So I may be one that could come up with ideas, but a model railroader who can only come up with ideas is just an armchair railroader, right? The board has to include tinkers and builders. And I think Gordy has been very, very good at melding those skill sets together, and knowing when we can talk big and knowing when we have to sort of push small. And we've got, it's sometimes easy for a person like me to look across somebody else at the table and say, well, how come you can't think big like me, right? But that person's a doer. And we need all of those people. But that means it's all hard, right? We have to argue about everything and debate everything. And so I feel very blessed that there's a receptive audience. I thought when I got on the board that my biggest problem was everybody's going to think I was a nutcase and nobody was going to listen to me and nothing would ever happen. That's not the case. To your exact point, if I were to say, look, I'm taking this twice a year school thing idea and I'm running with it, I doubt if anybody would say, don't do that.
Well, then do it.
The problem is 2 months later, I'm going to be going like, how do I do this? I need help. This is bigger than I thought it was. And that's always more the challenge, I think.
Well, but, you could number one, you could use my online connection, because I have the ability to have 100 and some odd people or 200 people on a peak. So you would more than welcome to use this connection that I use for my podcast. So you can gather everybody together in an AML boardroom, and then number two, do it. It's like all you need is some place to have everybody gather, pick a day and do it, because it's an absolutely brilliant idea. It's a beyond brilliant idea. It would change the organization. It would help push the organization forward. Absolutely. It's a brilliant idea.
One of the reasons why that hasn't been on my list is something else was more important to me. If I could just real quickly say, one of the initiatives I brought on the board was this Vision 2030 idea. The other one was what I call scale connectors. And I'm an in-scale modeler. And so I've been hearing.
Oh, wait a minute.
There we go.
Now I'm starting to understand.
I knew I liked you, John. I knew it.
Oh, my God.
That means that for all of the time that I've been around, I've been hearing these, hallway conversations about the NMRA this and the NMRA that. So when I got onto the national board, I said, one of the things I want to do, because I've been on the inside and can see the workings of this, I don't see any systematic prejudice against people who care about this or care about that or work in this scale or work in that. So I set out to say, look, what we got to do is we got to level up in this area. We have to communicate much, much better to the world that all scales are welcome. We have to provide resources where appropriate. We have to connect people together. We just have to create a whole bunch more of this onboarding and welcoming nature and fellowship and all those things around these other things. So we have this initiative called Scale Connectors. It too has been kind of slow together because of time and resources and all that. But it's a simple idea of having, it's sort of like what we were talking about with this division superintendents. A few times a year, we get a bunch of people together on a call and we just talk. My broader vision is that won't replicate the resources that are in other places, but we can direct people to those. Like in the N-Scale world, we have an organization called NRail, which is an umbrella over the N-Track standard and the T-Track standard and Fremo N-Scale. And so we don't need to replicate that, or there's an S-Scale association. But we can connect people and we can sort of tell the story of the NMRA in a different way. And frankly, by the way, a big part of that is telling those people, you have to take some responsibility here too and lean into this organization. And what that usually means is you need to write articles for our magazine and you need to show up at meetings and give clinics, and you need to do so. It's not a one-way kind of thing. But this is just an example. I think it's in this same vein, Lionel, right? It's like what's happened is, what happens in our hobby all the time is two people look at each other askance, and then they go away deciding they don't like each other anymore. And 30 years later, there's a whole big, huge Hatfield-McCoy culture around that. Everybody knows they don't like each other, but nobody knows why anymore. And, and it's like, that's ridiculous. There's, and you just gotta, I don't know, rebuild these bridges. So that's another thing that we're working on that I'm pretty excited about is scale connectors. I want the N-scalers to see the value in the NMRA.
When you say join all scales or all scales are equal, you're not including S-scale in that, are you?
Well, it's an asterisk.
Yeah. S-scale's an asterisk.
Unfortunately, it's those kind of jokes that lead to these Hatfield and McCoy things sometimes. And you need to have a better sense of humor about that. But
Boom.
Like when you've been saying all these years, right? It's, N-scale is lost in the hobby. It's, I laugh about that. Other people are like, well, other people are going to go, well,
it's like a bad Wi-Fi signal. When it works, it's great, but when it doesn't, it's horrible.
I don't laugh at that. It burns me up every time you say that.
Yeah,
I'm glad you got on the podcast to overthrow things from the inside.
And yet, you're still here.
Right.
The other thing, you hear all this complaint. Well, there's too much this skill, too much that skill, and the ones whining said, well, would you write an article for the magazine? Oh, no, I can't do that. Well, then what do you expect? Publishers can only produce what they get submitted. They can't write everything themselves. If somebody feels strongly there should be more X scale in the magazine, well, work with your friends and colleagues or yourself to come up with some content you can submit to the publication and get it done.
Well, not everybody can write, though. That's the problem.
I think the bigger issue is here. You have to realize that when we come together to do things, sometimes those things are hard and have friction in them. So let me go back to what you said earlier. If you go to a meeting and the NMRA president sort of gives you short shrift and walks by, you could either interpret that to mean that guy's a jerk and doesn't give a damn about me, right? Or you might say, maybe there's something going on in his life that I don't know about. I don't know the answer.
I would have been okay if he walked by. The fact that he walked in between us and turned his back on.
Yeah, I don't know the whole situation there, but I do know
I can only say after 35 years, it still rubs Bruce the wrong way.
Yeah, well, that's the way we are.
And that's not that to me. That's not that is light years away from what Gordy is doing at conventions where he's got meet the president and.
Well, sure.
Time slots set, and you get 100 people. Like,
well, there's no doubt. There's no doubt that things are changing and things have improved dramatically. But you still I'm terrified. Here's what I'm terrified of. All I hear about is the new system's going to change everything. The new computer system's going to change everything. The new computer system it's going to change everything. And it's 3 years from now, and the new computer system has been installed for almost 2 years, and nobody still gets a welcoming email, or people are still ignored. And it's like, just because you give somebody who's no good at fixing a car a new tool doesn't mean they're going to be any good at fixing a car.
Yeah, we have to work on both things, and I'm not the only one for sure. There are a handful of people who are really focused on culture. And the squishy things, if you will, the human interactions. And whether or not we can pull it off or not.
Well, and the problem is, John, basically, like, you should be, after Gordy's had enough, you're the next president of the NMRA. I'm sorry to tell you that, but you are.
Not happening.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It will create a write-in vote. But, a good example of what we're dealing with in today's virtual world is, I wrote, there was a big, long discussion on the fans page. And then I wrote a new post. I said, so let me get this straight. If I'm not willing to volunteer, I'm not a valuable member. And that created another whole big, long thing. And then I started getting the feeling that people thought I was like really angry and really mad. And I'm thinking, well, that's all I wrote. And it's like, even you, I could tell you were thinking you were coming on the podcast to get lambasted. And it's like, no, that's the exact opposite. I want this podcast to make the NMRA grow, not make it go away. And like, okay, I said, because I was frustrated, because I said, it's like, can we just, can we just get on with it? It's like, you have this great idea. Can we just get on with it? Like, do we have to go around and around? And it's like, that's what the Toronto Maple Leafs are. Oh, this year we drafted a new defenseman. This is going to change everything. No, it's not. Because you got 19 other guys on the ice, and you still got a goalie that can only wave at the puck as it's going by.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting analogy, especially when you say, how come this one organization can't be successful and this other one, what was it, the Las Vegas team?
Yeah.
Go from expansion to Stanley Cup in a couple of years. In
7 years. Yeah. Like,
and I mean, have some of us at the, well, I don't know about anybody else, but have I ever stayed up late at night and asked the question, should I just chuck all this and start my own association? Well, yeah, sure. I mean, it's like if you're starting from scratch, you could do so, which actually is interesting. That kind of goes into point number 6 for me, which is, I think we don't think about this enough, is that like some groups exist in opposite. They exist because they came out of NMRA with a feeling that they wanted to do something different from NMRA. And of course, I'm thinking mostly of RPM, right?
Well, yeah, let's save that discussion. Will you come back on in about a month or so?
Sure. I just, where I was headed with that is we could start a different association with a clean slate and just, but that's not what I want to do, because I thought the NMRA was important since I'm 12 years old. Since an adult told me when I was 12 years old, John, one of these days you're going to grow up and you're going to be a member of the NMRA because that's an important organization for this hobby. And, and so I'm 12 years old. I don't even know what any of it means. I'm going to be an MMR, and it's been, so I don't wake up every morning and go, so what does the NMRA do for me today? What am I getting for my fees? To me, it's just like, and I think you've expressed the same thing. It's just like, I'm going to be a member because that's what we do. This is my hobby,
Yeah.
So I have to work in this system, not in opposition to this system.
Exactly.
I have to change it from the inside.
I'll never stop being a member of the NMRA, regardless of how, even if it got worse, I wouldn't stop being a member of the NMRA, because it's what's created the hobby that we all enjoy today. We just got to figure out a way to make it better. Now we got to stop because we've been going for too long. But you say you're an N scaler. Do you have any Rapido trains?
Your fast track to model railroading fun.
Rapido trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
I do have some Rapido trains, including 3 new locomotives that are on the way in the mail right now.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go. And then the next time when you come back in a month or so, can you explain T-track to me, because it makes no sense to me?
Don't do it, John. I've tilted at that particular windmill many times.
Yeah, I've heard you. You have to say it is pretty hard to understand, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's very difficult. It's like when I was in grade 10 math and they started introducing algebra, and I was like, what? Why do I got to know what X is? Well, if you don't know what X is, you can't solve the equation. Well, if you'd put the numbers on the board, I would solve the equation. All right, that's it. We got to stop, because you're going to come back in a month or so, and we'll pick up where we left off. And I think in the meantime, when we release this, I'm going to put this particular email on the website so people can read the whole thing. And then in the meantime, my new mantra now is to get that superintendent's meeting going twice a year. That's going to be the thing I'm going to latch onto, because that is an absolute brilliant idea. That is a brilliant idea.
Superintendent school.
Superintendent school, yeah. And should we call it superintendent school or
university?
Yeah, let's call it university. It sounds more. Let's ask. And also, we got to get more discussion, because Brad is a classic example of, they started Iron City N Scale. How many members you got now?
1,184.
Yeah, like they got 1,200 members of this thing, and it doesn't.
Aren't you impressed that I checked that before this, because I figured you were going to ask?
Actually, you know what, Brad? Nothing you do impress me.
In spite of how hard I try.
Yeah. Can I ask you a personal question, Brad?
Sure, Lionel.
And I don't want you to be offended. This is not a slight against your family.
Okay.
But did your parents ever have any kids that weren't mentally challenged?
Yeah. My younger sister was the valedictorian of her high school and college classes.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go.
Notice I didn't include myself in that, though.
Yeah. All right, that's it. That John, you're awesome. You are just friggin' awesome, buddy. You are what makes me love the NMRA. And I mean that with all my heart. I just think you're just one of the best things about the whole organization. But you're going to come back on, and I'll continue to berate you mercilessly.
I don't mind it. And I know you know this too, but there are lots of us that way, right?
Well, then we got to get some more of them on the podcast, because I want them to use the AML to help make the NMRA grow. I'm proud of the number of people we've got to sign up to the NMRA, and if there's anything the AML can do to help the NMRA make the organization stronger, please feel free to use it. And that's it. So now this is the end of email, but this is on the free channel, which is why it's sponsored by Rapido Trains.
Your fast track to model railroading fun.
If it's N, if it's HO, the fast track is Rapido.
Kelly, can you give out our email address?
Yes, if you want to reach us for the wonders of email, you can reach us at modelerslife@gmail.com. That's modeler with one L like N scale, not two L's like Williamson.
Wow, that wasn't bad.
Thank you for that, Kelly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that.
Nice.
That was pretty good. And if you didn't catch that email address, if you go to our website, amodelerslife.com, and don't get me started why the email is one way and the website's another way. Don't get me started on that whole story. If you go to amodelerslife.com and scroll down just a little bit, you'll see a picture of the moderately agitated mailboy in a particularly agitated state. And John, can I ask you a question?
You bet.
Have you ever wanted a T-shirt with a hot dog on it?
I suppose I should say yes, huh?
Yes, that is the correct answer.
Well, if you go to Midwest Model Railroad, and their URL is midwestmodelrr.com, and go on the navigation bar and scroll across the navigation bar to other, and then the AML shop will drop down. There'll be a link there to the AML shop. Boom. You are in a wonderland of AML merchandise, hats, hoodies, T-shirts, mugs, whatever you could possibly need. And in there, you'll find a T-shirt with a hot dog on it. And one of our members here right now has a large selection of T-shirts with hot dogs on them.
A large selection of large T-shirts with hot dogs.
He was a large, beastly man.
Beastly bulging man.
Beastly bulging man, yeah.
In a blue leisure suit.
Yeah. That's what we should be wearing at Springfield. We should all get blue leisure suits.
Oh, jeez.
to serve cheese balls in you.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, that's what we got to do. At some point at Springfield next year, we'll get John to come over for an hour, and he can serve cheese balls as well.
Yeah.
You know what would be awesome? If Scott brought his bus up, then we could stand outside of it with a blue leisure suit serving cheese balls saying, that there's an RV.
Oh, that right there is an RV. But don't you go falling in love with it none. I'll be leaving. I'll be taking it with me when I leave here next month. If I woke up tomorrow with my head sewn to the carpet, I wouldn't be more surprised than I am right now. That's been said in my office more than once, I'll tell you. Okay, what else do I got to talk about? Oh, yeah, and if you like this podcast and you like twice as much podcasting a week, if you go over to scroll down again on our website, you'll see a link to our Patreon channel, and boom, for just a few cents a day, you can have twice as much podcasting a week. And if you join the T-shirt level, there's a T-shirt level for Patreon. You can all. What is happening with the microphone? Is that you, Kelly?
Yeah, it was me. It was moving. It's loose. Sorry.
Oh my God. This is, you know what, John, I wouldn't come back on here. You're probably doing more harm to the NMRA.
I'm glad John came on. That's good.
If you go to, if you join our T-shirt level, then you can join the game show that's sweeping the globe. Hey, dude, where's my shirt? Which is, everybody gets a T-shirt every year. And then, it's just, we don't know what year it is that you get the T-shirt. But we just sent a whole bunch to Australia, and everybody over there's got them. And from our, it turns out our friend Nigel Garshore wasn't going to keep all the T-shirts. He did, in fact, forward them to all the members of the Australian division of the AML Nation. The Australian division of the AML Nation. You know what we need? A superintendent for the Australian division of the AML.
There you go.
Now, Lionel, I wonder how many, I got my T-shirts at Springfield this year.
Right.
But then like 2 months later, you sent me an email and said, I need your address so I can send you your shirts. and without thinking appropriately, I said, I already got them.
Yeah.
That was a mistake, of course.
That was a screw up. But
so it makes me wonder how many people have actually gotten a double delivery by now.
Well, let's see here. It says here, but it says here, it's so far you've only gotten 2 T-shirts, so I owe you a third one by now. You see, that's why I need your address.
I see. I just think that we tend to talk a lot about how people are not getting their T-shirts, but it's possible that some people out there are getting more than they're supposed to.
Absolutely. And our buddy Neil in Hawaii. What's his last name?
Erickson.
Neil Erickson in Hawaii. I hooked. He was talking on the fans page one day on Facebook, and he was unhappy because he'd spilt paint on his maroon T-shirt. And I said, well, I'll send you another one. He's like, will you? And I went, yeah, I'll send you another T-shirt. Don't worry about it. We don't want you being unhappy because you don't have it. It's kind of a fun game because everybody gets their T-shirt. The key is, when will you get your T-shirt? That's what makes the game so fun.
And isn't it true that you don't actually have to have the shirt in your hands in order to have ownership of it? I mean, they can still own it and it still sits in your office in Canada, right?
Yeah, it still sits in no, it's a warehouse just outside of Busted Knuckle.
Oh, okay. All right.
What if I'm thinking about this all wrong, and what we should be doing with our membership is sending them an email that says, look, you're going to get a welcoming message. Stop being so demanding.
Make your own game show.
Maybe we should just lean into that.
Now we're getting somewhere. The AML helps to improve the NMRA. When will it, as the new game show, Sweeping the Nation, hosted by Pat Sajak, when will I get my welcome message?
Our records show that you've been a member for less than a decade. What are you griping about?
Yeah. Say goodnight, Dick.
Good night, Dick.
Good night, Dick.
Good night, Dick.
Good night, Dick.
But I think that I'm inclined to say that Rhodey stole my heart. You can keep the 49. Herring gulls that dot the skies, blue waves that paint the rocks, waters rich with Neptune's life, the boats that line the docks. I see the lighthouse flickering to help the sailors see there's a place for everyone. Rhode Island's it for me. Rhode Island, oh, Rhode Island, surrounded by the sea. Some people roam the earth for home. Rhode Island's it for me. I love the fresh
Transportation for AML guests provided by Diamond Limousine. Diamond Limousine, where all of our vehicles are true diamonds in the rough.
It's another Lincoln Homer.
There's like 2.5 hours of my life I'll never get back.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, I got to call Treaster, and then I got a graduation party I got to go to. But John, it was really great meeting you, and thanks. I thought it was a really productive talk. So you take care, and hope to do this again soon.
Brad, can I ask you one question? No, never mind.
Sure.
I changed my mind already. Okay, that's it. We're done.
Oh,
So who's graduating?
Yeah, who's graduating?
A good friend of mine who he's actually a biology teacher at our school, but his son just graduated this year.
Oh,
now his son's 35 and he just got out of high school. But
yeah, really.
Yeah, that's the rather unfortunate part of it. Yes, but
Wow.
All right, guys. Good talking to you.